Welcome to another insightful edition of Beyond the Numbers, coming to you live on the Joy News channel and across all our social media handles. My name is Winston Taki and I'm doing this with
Isaac Ofieje, and tonight we're having an important conversation on the re-election of Donald J. Trump and what's in for the next president of the Republic of Ghana. On the Smart World, we'll be discussing a lot of things from trade to climate to geopolitics. I bet you have to stay and watch this, Winston.
Yes, we'll take you through a very insightful journey in how it relates to Ghana, especially our history with the U.S. and how we've come so far. What are the risks? Some are uncertain, especially with the deals that Ghana has in terms of partnership with the U.S. Many are also quite not optimistic about the policies that Trump intends to project from trade, health, and many sectors. We'll touch on that right now. But first, let's start with Ghana's history with the U.S.
Yes, I mean, when we start with the history, we know that in our Fourth Republic, we have always had presidents of the U.S. visited a certain president in Ghana. So 1998, when Bill Clinton actually visited Ghana, that was the president there, J.J. Rawlings. He was the president. And in 2008, we saw another certain president in the U.S. also visiting Ghana, which is George Bush, when Kufuor was actually in power. Then comes, Barack Obama in 2009, the time of, may so rest in peace, Professor Evans Fifiata Mills. A certain president in the U.S. also visited Ghana. So that tells you that the U.S. and Ghana relationship is not something that you should joke with. For a certain president in the U.S. to actually visit your country in this Fourth Republic, we've had almost all U.S. presidents visiting Ghana, except maybe Joe Biden, who did not visit, but his vice actually visited in 2020, just last year, was in Ghana, and she touched on a number of issues. It was just Donald Trump between 2016 and 2020 that we saw a certain president in the U.S., neither him nor his vice president actually visited the country.
That's an interesting analysis. And let's look at the key issues that were of key interest during the U.S. election. All of them went to their campaign trail. They spoke about their policies, how they intend to support the policies. They have support from some businesses and conglomerates that has to do with funding and also the direction which the country intends to go in the next 4 years. Now, key issues that came to light but were
issues that are important to Africa,
Absolutely important to Africa as of now. Immigration laws, LGBTQ, trade, grants and aid, climate funding. We'll be touching on key issues such as trade, grants, and climate funding. These are quite essential. When we speak about how much these funds from this support our national reserves, you'll be amazed. We'll go into the figures shortly. Now let's go to the next one.
Well, so this is both of them, going into the elections, Harris and Trump, their policies on the war in the Middle East. You may say that, look, this is the war in the Middle East. How does it affect Ghana? If you are the next president of the Republic of Ghana and you are watching us tonight, the war in the Middle East is very, very important. What were their stands on this, war in the Middle East? Let's talk about Trump because he's now the president-elect. He says he's going to end the war immediately. Now, with the war in the Middle East, we know there's one commodity that's associated with it. That is
basically crude.
Exactly.
That's
so fuel, Winston.
Trump has a strong policy on fuel. He intends to champion U.S. exploration in the country to ensure there's more supply of fuel.
Talking a lot about fracking,
Basically, and that is what is currently being projected. Just as it was announced, we currently saw fuel prices hiking up on a global international market because the anticipation of his policy is quite immediate.
Now, I mean, no matter how you look at the fuel economy or the crude economy, for us as a country, we export crude and we import refined crude. So on the side of exporting crude in itself, we are not really benefiting. Why? Because prices are not at the fair level. Last 2 years, we saw crude prices rising as high as $100 per barrel. Now we are talking about 70, 75. It's not really favoring us. But on the side of the refined crude or the importation aspect, we are cashing in, or it's good for us because, look, we are not spending more in terms of the importation of the crude. When we come to refined crude, because, I mean, now you have some stability in terms of the U.S. economy. We are benefiting from the dollar that's not as strong as it used to be last, a year ago or so. So now you go to the pumps, although fuel prices are really high, but it's not as high as the 23 cedis we saw last year, Winston.
Well put. Now let's look at another issue that are of great interest.
Climate change.
Exactly. Now, according to Harris, when she was campaigning, she consistently highlighted the relevance of climate funding. And that was quite vociferous during the COP21, basically. So she says it is an existential threat to not just U.S., but the whole of Africa, the whole of the world. So that was a key focus. According to Trump, it's a whole hoax, and therefore there's a need to cancel it. So many are anticipating that he may pull out of the COP21 need be.
Now, if you are the next president of Ghana, why is this important? There is a whole $100 billion available funding commitment from the UN in the fight against climate issues. And it's been there for a long time, and disbursement has been a key issue. And President Akufo-Addo has been one of the key leaders who have been saying that, look, the West have not actually, stood by what they have actually said in terms of the commitment. Going into 2025, 2026, Trump doesn't really see this as a big issue. He doesn't see why the U.S. should be committing such huge amount of money to this sort of issue. And so he said he's going to exit the Paris, Club agreement in terms of
another very interesting conversation that also has to do with issues on global stand. China's unfair trade practices, that is what Harris has been championing. She also sees this could include punitive measures such as tariffs, producing alternative products in the U.S. So
let's focus on this man, because he is now the president.
So the past and the future.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the future. According to some perspectives, he says that the Chinese trade practices is quite imbalanced. Therefore, he intends to ensure all importation into the country attracts maximum 10% tariff on imported products. His key focus is to grow local industries in the U.S. He also intends to enact a 10 to 20% tariff on nearly all imports. So that's what he's looking at.
Maybe apart from Trump's private jet and his golden escalator, there's one thing he really loves. That is tariffs.
Yeah.
So under Trump, you should expect more tariff. And he is going, I don't want to say going after China, but he says that China is one of the main targets because he feels that China is using the U.S. as a dumping ground.
He did that some time back when he was president, when China decided to cut down the rate and importation, and he imposed 25% tariff on specific mineral products that were fueling the Chinese economy, and the ripple effect was immediate.
There's one thing Trump also loves. He loves to see a very strong dollar. And we know when the dollar is strong, emerging economies like us and the next president should be worried that emerging economies will actually, struggle. Now, the war in Ukraine for me is a big issue. This is Ukraine. This is happening in Europe. This is a NATO, rated or related issue. But how does it affect the next president of the Republic of Ghana? What are some of the key issues? The war is very important. Trump really doesn't see the reason why U.S. should be committing billions of dollars. He has actually referred to Zelensky as the greatest salesman in the world. He says he comes to the U.S. and walks away with billions of dollars. So, look, Trump says they are no longer going to fund the war in Ukraine. That simply means that Europe must step in. And if Europe is stepping in, this is the place that Ghana looks up to when we are going for Eurobonds.
Absolutely.
That money we use to stabilize our economy. Between 2022 and 2023, when we didn't have this money, we've all seen how the economy has actually struggled. We've had to do an IMF program. And at the moment, we are really struggling, still under an IMF program, still trying to see that the city will be stabilized. Trump doesn't really see this as a key issue. He doesn't want to commit money there. So it means that the burden is not going to be on Europe. And if you go to Europe, the two giants, which is France and Germany, are also not in a good relationship at the moment. In terms of their economy, they are not in a good status at the moment, where Even Germany has had to sack their finance minister.
Let's take it home to the next slide, which is basically bringing the conversation now.
Let's quantify the tariff issue.
When we look at Trump in his key policies, says that 160% of tariff of import from China is gold.
That's 60%.
Yeah, 60%. Yeah. 20% on import from the rest of the world is what he's driving out, just to ensure that the U.S. business environment is robust. The investors are on their feet to ensure their job. His key focus is to create more jobs. And when we speak about jobs, reliable jobs, and ensure the labor policies go in favor of workers.
Interest of the U.S.
Yeah.
So U.S. first. That's Trump for you. But he says something that actually caught my attention, that if you decide to ditch the dollar as a global reserve or a foreign exchange reserve, what is going to happen is that U.S. can pose tariffs as high as 100%.
That is a serious
that's scary.
That's scary. Right now, we know institutions who are trying to ensure the U.S. doesn't necessarily control how money flows globally. The BRICS are on the conversation to try to bring about a common currency for trade. And many are now moving to gold reserves as a means
of
transaction.
Ghana.
Ghana. Ghana, it will take time, although it is now strategic in terms of we having that shock absorber going into gold because of the stability of the gold market for quite some time now. Since January to now, we've seen over 245% increment in terms of value of the gold prices. So that was one thing that advised the central bank to go into the gold coin as one of the key investment alternative in the country. But let's bring it down as well.
Well, I mean, now let's go into the world of trade, because the whole thing has to do with international relationship, whatever, diplomacy. The most important thing is trade. What are you getting and what am I getting? What is Ghana going to get? And what's the outlook for the next president of the Republic of Ghana after the December 7th election? So we decided to look at, U.S. relationship with Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of import of oil, or how U.S. imports oil from Sub-Saharan Africa under the AGUA, which has been one of the biggest initiatives that U.S. actually introduced somewhere 2000, and is expected to expire in 2025 next year.
So we see that from the red angle, it was going up under the Republican.
The red is actually the Republican government, is the Democrat.
Basically. So the support was around 61.2 billion. And the Democrat, we saw the AGUA trade dwindle a bit to around 48.8 billion consistently until between 2016 to 2020, we saw it increase marginally at 8 billion. Surprisingly, from 2020, we started seeing trade picking up in terms of countries under the AGUA who are benefiting from the U.S., hitting up to 4.6%.
Now, since Trump is the man of the moment, let's look at between 2016 and 2020, when he was actually in power, and see what really happened. Look, it did not start to drop under him. Yeah. It started way in 2011, started dropping from as high as $48.8 billion to as low as $6 billion, came really down again under Trump and started picking up again around $8 billion. And before he was leaving office, in terms of the oil trade between Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa and the U.S., it was actually on a decline until the Democrats
took over
under the the administration of Biden took over in 2020, and we saw it moving up again, but still not at the levels that we wanted it to be.
If you look at the Biden's administration, they consistently champion renewable energy policy. Therefore, putting aside fossil fuel to ensure they cut down on carbon emission were a key conversation then. Trump consistently keep pushing for fossil fuel projects, more industries, more businesses. Therefore, there's the need for more importation. So it appeared that then the U.S. was more into production. They had more in reserve. So they were not controlled by most of the global players who determine the prices on the international market. And that OPEC and the rest were more subtle because the U.S. then had control until then. So possibly in the next 4 to 4 years, we're going to see a lot of oil-related conversation on the geopolitical outlook.
Are we going to see the spike continue? That 40, you see the upward movement? Or is it going to come down again?
I perceive it will come down briefly when it comes to oil imports. But that is not just the only thing. Now let's look at the trade aspect, which is
real trade in terms of if you combine exports and imports between the U.S. and Sub-Saharan Africa, what has it been under Trump and under actually the Democrats?
Under Trump, it was around 104.7.
That's actually, under
2006,
Bush, right?
yes, under Bush.
2008, Obama.
Under Bush, it was around $104.7 million billion basically, before the Democrats took over between 95.5 billion, which was quite astronomical. But since then, it has been falling down to the tune of 40.9 billion, which until Biden took over, that we began to see marginal increase. Same story in terms of trade.
Yeah, I mean, but you see the values going up again, just like we saw for the oil. And under Trump, although it was around $40.9 billion in terms of the export and the import, we did not really see, that marginal increment until Biden came through. But it's also safe enough to say that we've had the biggest under the Republican, administration under Bush. Bush actually was very gracious to Ghana. In fact, we benefited a lot. I remember the N1 that
all those big projects, they still exist now. Now we bring it down, basically, especially import from the Sub-Saharan African countries. Same story. So
I think we should focus on Ghana now. Ghana and the U.S. trade and how it's been. So if you see the red, that is the U.S. exports from Ghana and imports also to Ghana. So imports from Ghana and export to Ghana. So you see red and green there. Winston, what has been the story so far?
You see consistently between 2013 to 2020, the trade balance has been minimal, ranging between 0.86 billion. But the same happens to imports, which is the green line you see there. From 2012 to 2016, the trade balance was quite linear until it started going up from 2017 to 2020. That was when Biden and his leadership, Obama then, was quite vociferous about ensuring that Africa has a connection. And it picked up in 2022 to 2.8 billion in terms of import from Ghana. And that was quite commendable, especially looking at the conversation that was happening. We know between these years, we had the COVID-19, all those pandemic-related activities.
So borders were actually closed.
Were closed and all that, so we are forced to import more. And that was good for Ghana. However, it came down to the tune of 0.94 billion. That was quite shocking.
This is the interesting convergence point. Just to look at 2016 to 2020, you see that convergent point where Trump was actually in power, 2016 to 2020, you see the closing of the gap. So I don't know, what you benefit from me should be as equal as what I also benefit from you. I don't know if that's a story.
Trump is a realist. It's a realist. So it feels like one hand gives, one hand takes.
Absolutely.
So that's what's happened there, basically.
Now, we've been talking about the next president of Ghana. If you actually, if you will be the next, we don't know who it will be, whether it will be,
whoever it may be.
Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, whatever number or whatever party. This is the burden ahead. And for me, this is key. One of the reasons why we brought the war in Ukraine is the fact that it has direct relationship with funding in Europe and how Europe can actually turn it back on Africa if it has to be that they have to step in the stead of the U.S. to fund the war in between Russia and Ukraine or support, Ukraine. What is the burden? This is actually just Eurobond's commitment.
Basically.
Our burden ahead. In terms of coupon payments or interest payment plus principals, what are we expected to pay?
Next year is going to be an interesting year. I keep saying, and I keep repeating it on the show. Next year, 2025, any government in power will be geared to pay a debt of 1.3 billion.
The start from 692 to 1.3 billion. That is one of the humps. I mean, it's a big jump.
The highest in all the debt payments. Just next year.
And this is just
next year,
Eurobonds, commercial debt alone.
It hasn't come there.
We've not spoken about bilateral, multilateral, and other debts. We've not even come to the domestic space. So it tells you that the next president of the Republic of Ghana would have a lot to do when it comes to debt servicing obligation. Currently, we have some moratorium and we are enjoying the free fiscal space. We are not really paying as high as we are supposed to pay because of the restructuring we've done. But if you are watching us and you are looking at this graph, this is the burden ahead. The burden ahead is that Ghana wouldn't have it easy. And why is the U.S. important? The U.S. economy when it's healthy, Ghana's economy will also be healthy. Why? Because most of this debt servicing obligation will be in the US dollar. And we know Trump is one person that loves to see a very strong dollar. When the dollar is strong, it means that it will cost more cedis to actually get $1. And that means that when we make more revenue in the country and we are about to service our debt, it will be difficult because we will now have to be exchanging more cedis for fewer dollars. And then also, we brought in the element of the Eurobond where it could be that Europe will be turning their attention to Ukraine.
We could have taken advantage of several policies like the One District, One Factory, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, all of them being more strategic in terms of how the government's or the nation's next 5 years development plan should be. If we are to strategically say we are producing certain amount of goods, packaging, add value and export, which could potentially give us some particular amount of money, instead of just taxing individuals and businesses, we could have gotten to just there. Yesterday at the CEO Summit, one of the key conversations...
You were there.
I was there, and you could see the business community, the temperature in the room was quite not optimistic, if I may put it, because you could hear business owners speaking about how policy has not aligned with the reality in the business community. Many businesses have taxes to pay, they have overhead costs to handle, and they have projections that they have
have actually suffered restructuring.
Basically, they have to re-strategize.
Bonds,
and it becomes difficult when the environment is not conducive for them to operate. Government is the decider. Whoever gets into the next chair of this nation should be considerate about the growth of businesses. One message that I took away is that if 4 businesses could be well given the support, they can equally have produced the amount of money we needed for the IMF, basically to champion our issues.
Well, so we end with this slide on the smart wall, which is that $12.45 billion of debt. This is just Eurobonds that will be
after the domestic debt
2024, this year, and 2037. That gives you an average of almost $1 billion every fiscal year. So, I mean, the next president of the Republic of Ghana, you have a tough job ahead. This has been Beyond the Numbers with me, Isaac Ofieje, and
my name is Winston Taki. We come your way, same time, 5:30 every Friday here on the Joy News channel. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.